MovieHead. Who loves movies? MovieHead. MovieHead.
All three.
He knows movies.
You know, I've seen you a lot of times before. I just mean to tell you the truth. Grew up very nice.
Thanks.
The same thing can easily be said about this ultra classic from Elia Kazan, On the Waterfront. 50 years exactly after its release date, it is still one of the most compelling, watchable movies I've ever experienced.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
Now, I'm thinking that if there's a record kept somewhere for most quoted movie lines, that contender line would have to be right up there with, "You talking to me?" In fact, I'd make a cheeky bet that lots of you younger pups out there have never even heard that line at all. Or if you have, you heard it in Raging Bull from De Niro. Now, am I right or am I right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, if I'm right, and I think I am, you're in for a double treat this time around on MovieHead. A truly great story and a seminal classic from one of my favorites, the guy who revolutionized acting with a fresh, raw style that other actors have been trying to mimic ever since, the recently departed one and only Marlon Brando.
Well, some people just got faces that stick in your mind. Where's John Friendly?
He's not here now.
Hey, who do you see to get a day's pay around?
Give me a break, Mac. I got a couple of kids.
Hey, Mac, I
Meatballs.
Definitely.
Edie. Edie, come here. I want to talk to you. Come with me.
Father, who'd want to kill Joey? Who'd want to kill Joey? Stay away from him! Stay away from him! Stay away from him!
Edie.
Terry.
Suppose I knew a guy that knocked somebody off. You think I ought to turn him in?
That's for you to figure out. Look, you can have it your way or you can have it his way, but you can't have it both ways.
Frank Sinatra wasn't just sharking after easy money when he forced Sam Spiegel to pay him off big time for breaking his promise. Sinatra said he was so bitter about losing the role that it strongly affected his ability to work well with Brando during the filming of their classic Guys and Dolls. I thought Old Blue Eyes was a little tougher than that myself, but what can you say? Sam Spiegel was one of the country's first independent producers, and he, like moi, was a Brando enthusiast. It's almost impossible to imagine that back in 1954, Brando was still a new kid on the block. Not the larger-than-life legend we think of now, but this movie went a long way to turning Brando into a superstar. On the Waterfront was a landmark production in many ways. Not only was it one of the first times an entire Hollywood production had been done on location in New York, it is the movie primarily associated with introducing Lee Strasberg's philosophy of method acting to the screen.
Hi, Terry.
Carl Malden, Eva Marie Saint, Rod Steiger, and Marty Balsam were all from that school. And of course, well, there was Brando.
Joey!
That guy Brando yells to in the tenement is about to get whacked by a bunch of jerks waiting on the roof. Now, the jerks are labor racketeers who prey on dock workers. It's the stuff of the Sopranos, right?
What are you, wise guy?
If I was wise, I wouldn't be no longshoreman for 30 years.
Brando didn't meet any Sopranos. He was hanging with the Stoolies. Being a method actor and all, you know, having to get in touch with and live his own Hoboken dock experiences. He befriended the rebel longshoreman his character Terry Malloy is based on. They hung out, he adopted many of his mannerisms. He went undercover.
Which side are you with?
Me, I'm with me. Terry.
Actually, when it came time to shoot this movie, Brando invited the screenwriter Bud Schulberg for a walk through the neighborhood. The same neighborhood Bud had written about in his book and for the screen. Schulberg thought there was just no way Marlon Brando wouldn't get recognized walking around the streets of New Jersey. This was after Streetcar Named Desire and a few other smaller films aimed at the younger crowd. But Brando proved him wrong. This guy was so thoroughly immersed in his character that day that he walked from one end of town to the other, on the street, in bars, amongst the real dock workers, and nobody, not a single person, asked him for an autograph. On the Waterfront hits theaters in one seriously vintage year for Hollywood, 1954. Movies out this year include The Caine Mutiny, Rear Window, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The Hollywood Reporter writes, On the Waterfront packs a terrific wallop and calls it one of the year's most important films. Variety declares, under Elia Kazan's direction, Marlon Brando puts on a spectacular show, giving us a fascinating, multifaceted performance. Also making movie headlines, Greta Garbo receives an honorary Oscar for her unforgettable screen performances. Marilyn Monroe tours the battlefront in Korea to boost morale for the troops. And Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis respond to rumors they're breaking up, joking they've set a date for 1996. I guess that was funny in '54. Back in 1954, Elia Kazan was very unpopular in Hollywood. In 1952, he had denounced 15 of his former colleagues to the House Un-American Activities Committee, and people in Hollywood were buzzing. Kazan had been a member of a communist party, had even refused to name names, but all of a sudden, freaked out, he pulled a brigadier general from Dr. Strangelove and dropped the bomb.
You ratted on us, Terry.
Action.
Elia Kazan said he told on those communists to help save America from communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, all that stuff. But not everybody was buying it. Denouncing those guys also gave Elia his freedom to make movies. Viva Zapata is a big anti-communist statement of a movie directed by Elia Kazan and, interestingly, starring Marlon Brando. But this movie, which came out 2 years later, is much more personal. Kazan told everybody On the Waterfront was his official defense, the reason he ratted.
What do you really care, am I right?
I don't know how I feel about what Elia Kazan did. I usually reserve making heavy personal judgments about film gods, at least when their masterpieces are on MovieHead. I do know this movie is as strong and compulsively watchable a statement as I've ever seen. And luckily, thanks to Elia's change of heart, it's next on the Waterfront.
I want to know who killed my brother!
On the Waterfront literally swept the Oscars in that monumental film year, 1954. It took home Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Writing, Best Cinematography, Art Direction, and Editing. It was a true coup, and for Elia Kazan, it was a kind of vengeance. He called it one of the happiest moments of his life and described feeling triumph over all those who had made him persona non grata and had turned their backs on him. Kazan said Terry felt just like him, both ashamed yet proud of himself for singing like a canary. According to Kazan, when you put those two things together, you just end up feeling ambivalent. A little foolish, but stronger than the rest of the people around them who were ready to let a bunch of hacks mess with a good and democratic way of life.
He wanted my philosophy of life. Do it to him before he does it to you.
Give me a beer.
Obviously, there was a lot of press about Kazan and communists and On the Waterfront being his public defense, but not every headline back then belonged to the director. Marlon Brando was just getting started being a clown and a rabble-rouser. Now, Brando shocked the nation's critics when he decided the whole Oscar award thing, in which he was being recognized for his work as Terry Malloy, was ridiculous. Critics were very upset by this, and it caused a huge stink, which Brando decided to quell when, oddly enough, he showed up at the Oscars to win Best Actor and charm the pants off of everybody.
Oh, what a fruitcake you are.
It was almost immediately following the 1954 award ceremony that Brando began to adopt what Bud Schulberg, the writer of On the Waterfront, coined a kind of quirky, off-putting attitude. Again and again on talk show after talk show, Brando dismissed acting as something of no great importance, something even demeaning.
I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am. Let's face it.
As all of us Brando fans know, he recently passed away and we lost one of our greatest treasures. Well, I lost my daddy, basically, but we also lost a grade A eccentric. What kind of guy pulls off what he did with Kazan and Streetcar Named Desire, yet ends up in the island of Dr. Moreau with talcum powder all over his head? I mean, honestly, watching him here again in this movie, it is all the more inconceivable how he could be so good in one film and then just go completely Elvis in another.
You don't understand. I could have had class.
And no MovieHead episode's complete without a little bit of gossip. So, from Brando's last film on Earth, The Score, shot in Montreal, apparently Brando is traipsing around calling the director, Frank Oz, Miss Piggy, a reference to the filmmaker's other gig as the voice of many a Muppet. He even did Yoda. Anyways, Brando would also come to work with nothing on his lower third, supposedly to make sure no shots would include his nether regions. And that wasn't the end of Brando's weirdness. He also insisted on speaking French to show his support for Quebec nationalists. Well, it looks like ambivalence ended up carrying over into just about everything in this guy's life.
There's more to this than I thought, Charlie. I'm telling you, there's a lot more.
No discussion of this movie would be complete without at least mentioning the French cameraman Boris Kaufman, a total genius. He was raised in the European tradition of independent filmmaking and was obviously a true artist. In fact, that's just what Kazan called him when he said the value of his interpretive camera work was right up there in this movie with Brando's performance.
And you really believe that, Drew?
Oh, and did I mention that Brando insisted on having a very secret funeral? Nobody was invited, not even Eva Marie Saint, who was just so beautiful in this movie. She stands out, you know, bathed in light. She's just, I don't know, she's such an interesting beauty. She's so different from the typical